Greetings, everyone, and welcome to Back to Ashes. I am your host, Phoenix. If this is your first time here and you begin to enjoy what you are hearing, please hit that like, hype, and subscribe button. And make sure you set your notification bell to all, that way you know every time I upload a video. To all the elite members, thank you so much for your love and dedicated support. I appreciate it more than you could ever know. With that being said, it is now time to go back to ashes, for once we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and a happier person every day. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for your dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Crime and Unsolved Mysteries. Right after this intro, there will be an ad. Right after the first case, there will be an ad. And after that, there will be no more ads within this video. Oh, and one more thing. Some of these cases may involve information that some may find disturbing. At this point, listener discretion is highly advised. The Last Visit, the horrific crime of Deborah Jeter. It was a quiet Friday evening at the Hillsborough 911 Dispatch Center on June 5, 2009. Situated about 60 miles south of Dallas, Hillsborough was the kind of place where emergency calls were more likely to involve traffic accidents or noise complaints than anything truly shocking. But just after 9 p.m., a call came in that would send shockwaves through the community and far beyond. The caller identified as Deborah Jeter, a 32-year-old local woman. Her voice was eerily calm. "I just killed my children," she said plainly. "Excuse me?" The dispatcher replied, taken aback. Jeter repeated herself, then elaborated. "One of them is dead. She's dead. But the other one, she wants to be saved, and she needs to be saved." Her tone began to shift, urgency rising as she cried out. "One of them is still alive. Hurry!" In the background, she could be heard speaking to someone. "Hold on, kid. They're coming," she said. Moments later, she added a plea to the dispatcher. "Tell them not to shoot me. I don't have a gun." Then came a moment of realization, her composure faltering. "Oh my God, she's dead. Oh my God." Just hours earlier, Jeter had picked up her two daughters, 13-year-old Kirsten and 12-year-old Kelsey, from their father's home. She and her husband, Lee, were in the midst of a divorce, and Jeter had been recently released from a mental health facility following a suicide attempt she'd made in front of the girls. That evening, she told them she had a surprise. The girls hadn't seen their mother in 2 weeks. Despite the recent trauma, they kissed their father goodbye and climbed into their mother's car, hopeful for a rare and happy moment together. But the surprise Jeter had in mind was unimaginable. She drove them to an abandoned farmhouse off Interstate 35. There, she attacked them with a knife, leaving one daughter dead and the other clinging to life. Then, she picked up the phone and called for help. Within minutes of Deborah Jeter's chilling 911 call, police and paramedics descended on the abandoned farmhouse off Interstate 35. The scene that greeted them was both surreal and horrifying. Jeter stood outside the building, her clothes soaked in blood, both hands raised in the air, holding a cell phone. Nearby, a blood-stained knife rested on the roof of a parked car. Inside, in a bathroom at the back of the dilapidated home, first responders made a grim discovery. 12-year-old Kelsey, a bright and soft-spoken girl who loved band and earned a place on the honor roll, was already dead. Her older sister, Kirsten, just 13, was critically wounded but alive. Medics worked quickly to stabilize Kirsten, airlifting her to Parkland Memorial Hospital in Dallas. She was rushed into emergency surgery and, remarkably, survived. But the physical and emotional toll of the attack would follow her for the rest of her life. Just days later, she was released from the hospital, just in time to attend her little sister's funeral. Deborah Jeter was arrested at the scene and charged with 1 count of murder and 1 count of attempted capital murder. Her bond was set at $1.5 million. She was placed on suicide watch in the Hill County Jail, where she remained silent, offering no explanation for what she had done. Hill County Sheriff Jeffrey Lyon told reporters, "We're still attempting to get into the mindset of why this mother turned so violently on her children." The small community of Hillsborough was left reeling. Shock and disbelief gave way to grief as neighbors, teachers, and classmates tried to come to terms with the tragedy. At Hillsborough Intermediate School, tributes poured in for Kelsey. Her teacher, J.C. Rogers, remembered her as a quiet, intelligent child, always the first to finish her work and often seen with a book in hand when others were talking. During a parent-teacher meeting earlier that year, Rogers had remarked on Kelsey's love of reading. He recalled Jeter laughing, saying that her daughter was always sneaking away to read at home too. Now, that same woman stood accused of killing her. Rogers, whose own wife worked as a nurse, remembered how Kelsey proudly spoke about her mother's plans to enter nursing school. "I'll really miss having her in class," he said. "She really was a nice little girl." As the news of the horrific attack spread, public outrage quickly followed. Many began to question how Deborah Jeter had been granted access to her daughters so soon after a serious mental health crisis, particularly one that had unfolded directly in front of them. Just weeks earlier, Jeter had attempted suicide in the family home, an act witnessed by Kirsten and Kelsey. At the time, she and her husband Lee were in the middle of a divorce. Following the suicide attempt, Jeter was hospitalized at DePaul Center in Waco from May 22nd to May 26th. After her release, legal proceedings resumed to determine visitation and custody arrangements. On June 4th, just 1 day before the attack, Judge A. Lee Harris presided over a hearing to address those very concerns. Lee Jeter had previously filed for a temporary restraining order against his estranged wife, citing the suicide attempt and expressing fears for the children's safety. In court filings, he had warned, "She may be released within a few days, and I am concerned about her possible actions regarding the children." In his request for full custody, Lee had cited the need to protect not only his daughters, but also any other person who has been a victim of family violence committed by Jeter. But during the hearing, his position appeared to soften. Jeter told the court she was taking 100 milligrams of Zoloft daily and said her mental health was steadily improving. Lee told the judge he had no problem allowing unsupervised weekend visits, so long as he was informed of the girl's whereabouts and granted access to her medical records. Judge Harris ultimately ordered that both parties sign medical release forms under HIPAA, allowing them to view each other's records. But that order came too late. Less than 24 hours later, during her first unsupervised visit since her release, Deborah Jeter carried out an attack that would devastate her family forever. In the aftermath, further questions emerged, especially around whether child protection authorities should have been involved after Jeter's suicide attempt. A spokesperson for Child Protective Services confirmed they had not been notified of the incident. "Had we been made aware," the agency said, "we would have been involved." In September of 2009, a judge set a trial date for March 8th of the following year. During the pre-trial hearing, it was revealed that since her arrest in June, Deborah Jeter had received only one visitor, her mother. Her defense attorney, Russ Hunt Sr., shared that his client was experiencing significant memory gaps, reportedly the result of a previous car accident. When asked whether Jeter was aware that her youngest daughter Kelsey had died, Hunt replied, "It depends on what day you talk to her. There have been periods of her life she has no recollection of. At the time, Kirsten Jetter, who had survived the attack, was expected to testify against her mother. Though she had expressed willingness to take the stand, she was understandably terrified to relive the events of that night. Ultimately, she never had to. On May 26, 2010, Deborah Jetter pleaded guilty to the murder of Kelsey and the attempted murder of Kirsten. She appeared in court via video link from jail. Kirsten and her father watched the proceedings remotely from a separate location. Jetter declined to make any statement during the hearing. Outside court, her attorney explained that she had been diagnosed with borderline personality disorder, a condition for which she had never received adequate treatment. He said that once she was found competent to stand trial, she made the decision to plead guilty, believing it to be the most compassionate thing she could do for her surviving daughter. According to Hunt, Jetter expressed deep remorse for her actions. On some days, she wept uncontrollably while speaking about the stabbings. On others, she recounted them with a flat, detached demeanor. He said she often spoke about her daughters with pride, referring to both Kirsten and Kelsey with affection. Deborah Jetter was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. With her conviction secured and the legal process complete, one question still lingered. Why? Despite extensive investigation, detectives were never able to establish a definitive motive. Jetter never spoke with them, and the most anyone could offer were speculations that the pressures of her deteriorating marriage, mental illness, and lack of adequate support may have led her to a catastrophic breaking point. But the true answer remains locked away with Jetter, and perhaps always will. What happened to Trevor Deely? 19 years have gone by since anyone saw a young Irishman named Trevor Deely. On the night of December 7th of 2000, he attended his work Christmas party in Dublin and simply vanished. His family have no solid clues and no sightings to pin their hopes on, and no idea if they will ever see him again. Trevor was just 22 years old at the time of his disappearance. He was born on the 15th of August, 1978, and he was the youngest of 4 siblings. Trevor grew up in Naas, Col Cadair, and moved to Dublin when he took up a computer course. In May 1999, he started work in the IT department of the Bank of Ireland. On the night he vanished, along with his colleagues, he went to the Hilton Hotel on Charlemont Place to celebrate the festive season. After the company due, he and some of his work friends decided to continue the night in Buck Whaley's nightclub on Lower Leeson Street. At around 3:30 a.m. on the morning of the 8th of December of 2000, Trevor left and started walking towards his flat on Serpentine Avenue in Ballsbridge, a suburb of Dublin. He never arrived home. It was raining heavily that night, and there was a taxi strike, and so Trevor made his way to his office building across the Leeson Street Bridge. CCTV footage released by the police showed Trevor interacting with a man outside the gates of the Bank of Ireland Asset Management Building. Just seconds before their brief chat, Trevor had walked past this man who had been standing in the rain beside a pillar around the corner for half an hour. Was he waiting for Trevor? Was it a prearranged meeting? After speaking with this man, Trevor went inside the gates of his place of work, locking them behind him. He then spent half an hour inside his office and had a hot drink with a colleague, Carl Pender, who was working a late shift. He also checked his emails and made a list of tasks he needed to perform the next day. Trevor then took an umbrella from the office and left, heading towards Baggot Street Bridge, presumably to continue his walk home. Carl Pender was the last known person to see Trevor all those years ago. At around this time, Trevor was known to have made a phone call to a friend back home in Nas. A voicemail that he left for him told his friend that he missed him. All was good and he would call him back later in the day. Sadly, that voicemail was deleted and the police made no effort to retrieve it. The last possible sighting of Trevor Deely was captured by CCTV in Haddington Road at about 4:14 a.m., which shows the man walking past the AIB Bank with an umbrella. This footage was enhanced in 2017 and is now known to definitely be Trevor, as the logo on the umbrella matches the one taken from the office. Police have also established that a man in dark clothing passes this camera about 34 seconds after Trevor goes by and appears to be following him. The police believe that this is the same man who was seen speaking to Trevor outside his workplace. This man has never come forward or been identified, despite numerous TV appeals. Trevor's case has been featured on news items and TV programs over the last number of years, but to no avail. When Trevor failed to show at work the next day, no one thought anything of it, as it had been a very late night. His flatmates were away for the weekend, and they had no idea that he had not arrived home after his Christmas night out. It was only when he didn't appear at work on the Monday morning that it was established that no one had seen or spoken to him since Thursday night. The alarm was then raised, but valuable time and possible information and clues were lost. In the intervening years, Trevor's sister Michelle had called the situation a relentless nightmare and has made personal appeals on many occasions. At the time of his disappearance, an extensive search of the area was made, and the River Dodder and Grand Canal were thoroughly examined. Potential witnesses were hard to track down, but dozens of night workers and partygoers were interviewed. Not a single piece of information was worth pursuing. In 2016, a full cold case review was carried out, but, yet again, nothing new came of it. Finally, in 2017, police thought they had maybe benefited from a breakthrough when an informant came forward. This informant told of how Trevor had become involved in an argument with a notorious drug-dealing gang and had been murdered on the night he disappeared. The informant advised a search of a wooded area in Chapelizod, approximately 9 kilometers away from where Trevor was last seen. Despite the discovery of a gun and a significant amount of drugs, no connection was made to the disappearance of Trevor Deely, and the search was called off in the September of 2017. Once again, Trevor's family were left with no closure on how their son or brother had simply vanished. At the time of writing this piece, December 8th of 2019, exactly 19 years after Trevor was last seen, there may finally be some new information. A month ago, a potential witness came forward. This witness has not been identified by the police, but it has been disclosed that their information supports the theory that Trevor was murdered after an argument with a criminal gang. A senior source describes this witness as highly significant, and it is hoped that a conclusion may be reached at last, and his family may find some peace. His brother Mark has said that he still holds out hopes that one day Trevor will walk through the door. On the 19th anniversary of Trevor's disappearance, police announced an appeal and urged anybody with any information to please come forward. Crime Stoppers is still offering a reward for anyone with information relating to the disappearance of Trevor Deely. They can be contacted anonymously if desired on 1-800-25-0025. The Boy Who Begged for Bread, Benjamin Cervera. On the morning of August 17, 2021, the emergency room at Christus Children's Hospital in San Antonio, Texas, was bustling with the usual chaos of a busy hospital. Nurses rushed between patients, doctors consulting charts, and worried parents lingered by their children's bedsides. Then, the doors burst open. A little boy was rushed inside. His body was frail, his skin bruised, his breath shallow. He was barely clinging to life. He was accompanied by a woman identified as Miranda Caceres, who spoke frantically, telling staff that her stepson, 4-year-old Benjamin Cervera, had suddenly become unresponsive at home. The ER staff immediately sprang into action. Benjamin's body was unnaturally still, dressed only in a disposable diaper soaked with urine. As they rushed him into a private examination room, his condition became even more alarming. His small frame was far too thin, his ribs pressing against his skin, his eyes sunken into his face. He weighed just 28 pounds, severely underweight for a boy his age. Bruises of varying shades marked his body, some fresh, others older. A doctor exchanged a glance with a nurse. Something was very wrong. This wasn't just an unexplained medical emergency. This was something way more sinister. Someone quietly instructed another staff member to call the police. Despite their best efforts, Benjamin's fragile body could take no more. His heart stopped, and within moments, he was pronounced dead. Detectives arrived at the hospital and immediately spoke with Miranda Caceres. She looked tired, but her face was lined with frustration rather than grief. Miranda wasted no time voicing her complaints. She said Benjamin wasn't her child. She was the child of her boyfriend, Branton Lee Cervera. She told detectives she had been left to care for 5 children while Brandon was rarely home. Then she spoke about Benjamin. She described him as bad, saying he never listened, cried constantly, and was difficult. When a detective carefully asked Miranda if she had been struggling with postpartum depression, she shook her head. No, she said. She was just exhausted. Miranda made shocking claims. According to her, Benjamin ate his own feces and would reach inside his own diaper to consume it. She said she didn't understand why he did it. Despite his behavior, she insisted she had never hurt him. Detectives listened as she explained her version of events. She claimed that she disciplined Benjamin the way any parent would, with timeouts, by making him sit on his bed. She said that she never laid a hand on him. But the evidence in front of them told a different story. Benjamin's body had been covered in bruises of varying stages. His tiny frame bore injuries that suggested prolonged mistreatment. When asked about these, Miranda had an explanation. She said Benjamin had inflicted those injuries upon himself. She described him as a troubled child, saying he often smacked himself in the face, hit his own head, bit his fingernails and toenails until they bled. She claimed that she had told Brandon about this behavior, but he had only responded with anger, cursing at her and dismissing her concerns. Then, Miranda pulled out her phone and showed detectives a video. In it, Benjamin was striking himself on the head, his voice small and weak as he begged for bread. Miranda said that before he died, Benjamin had been shoving his fingers down his throat, forcing himself to vomit. She claimed that he had thrown up blood and mucus, and she had assumed it was from scratching his throat too hard. At the Bexar County Medical Examiner's Office, Dr. Kimberly Molina conducted Benjamin's autopsy under bright overhead lights. What she found was devastating. Benjamin was markedly underweight, with no body fat. It was clear he had been systematically deprived of food over approximately 4.5 months. There was no underlying medical condition that could explain his frail state. Bruises covered his arms, legs, torso, scalp, and the back of his head. Despite Miranda's claims, these injuries were not self-inflicted. The pathologist determined it would have been impossible for a child Benjamin's size to cause such widespread damage to himself. But the most devastating revelation was yet to come. Benjamin had not died from his injuries. He had slowly starved to death. His body had simply given out, unable to sustain itself any longer. With the autopsy confirming deliberate starvation, detectives obtained a search warrant for the family's apartment on Eisenhower Road. At first glance, the apartment seemed ordinary. The living room tidy, kitchen clean, master bedroom well kept. But closer inspection revealed horrifying details. The refrigerator was locked, so was the pantry door and kitchen cabinets. Every source of food was secured. Then, detectives found a second bedroom with a lock on the outside. When they opened the door, the stench of urine hit them like a wall. While Benjamin's siblings had beds with duvets and pillows, Benjamin was forced to sleep on a bare, urine-soaked mattress. In the corner, cameras were mounted on the walls, their lenses pointed directly at the mattress. Detectives obtained a search warrant for Miranda's phone, and what they found was nightmarish. One video recorded on the day of Benjamin's death showed the 4-year-old sitting in Miranda's car, his frail body shaking. His voice, weak but desperate, filled the recording. "I want some bread." He clasped his hands together, begging repeatedly. From the driver's seat, Miranda's voice could be heard. "No, chill out." This recording was taken just 3 hours before Benjamin was pronounced dead. Other videos showed Benjamin striking himself in the head while begging for bread and water, being forced to eat breadcrumbs off the bathroom floor without using his hands, and being made to drink hand sanitizer. The camera captured his reaction, his tiny frame shaking as he frantically waved his hands in front of his mouth, begging for water through sobs as the alcohol burned his throat. In another disturbing clip, Benjamin was punching himself in the face in the back seat of a car. In yet another, he begged his father, Brandon, for food, his small hands folded in front of him as his clothes hung off his frail body. Detectives scrolling through photos stored on the device. There were images of Benjamin with swollen, bruised eyes, his face barely recognizable. The pictures clearly showed the slow, steady deterioration of his body. His arms grew thinner, his ribs became more pronounced, his eyes, once bright, fading into vacant exhaustion. Security camera footage from the apartment showed Benjamin trying to climb up to remove locks from the refrigerator and pantry, attempting to find ways around barriers in his bedroom, and picking empty snack bags from the trash. One clip captured him crying in his locked bedroom, begging for water and milk. In another recording, Benjamin could be seen trying to find a way around a steel gate that had just been installed in the bedroom. Another clip, recorded just 4 days before Benjamin died, showed Miranda speaking on the phone with his father, Brandon. Her tone was sharp, frustrated. "I can't take it anymore," she complained. "He starts yelling and screaming and throwing himself because he wanted bread." She sounded more annoyed than concerned. When detectives spoke with Benjamin's 10-year-old brother, he described the routine cruelty his younger brother endured. Miranda would force hand sanitizer and hot sauce down Benjamin's throat, watching as he gagged. She played a twisted game called flip-flop, throwing Brandon into the air and letting him fall to the ground. There was also the nasty water. Miranda would scoop urine from the toilet into a cup and force Benjamin to drink it. The brother described an incident at a park where Miranda took their soiled shoes and rubbed them on bread, then made Benjamin eat it. He was so hungry that he swallowed it without question. His brother continued, describing the punishments Miranda would inflict. She would hit Brandon with a belt or smack him on the bottom. but sometimes she missed and struck him on the lower back. Perhaps most heartbreaking, the brother admitted he had been too scared to help. He had tried once to give Benjamin food, but Miranda snatched it away and threw it in the trash. The investigation continued, and detectives learned that there were efforts to save Benjamin before it was too late. 1 month before Benjamin died, a relative made a desperate call to police pleading for a welfare check. Officer Oliver Perez arrived to find Benjamin with a swollen face, blackened eyes, and bruising on his head, torso, and arms. The child was abnormally thin, with visible ribs. When asked about the bruises, Miranda claimed Benjamin was hurting himself. Brandon added that he had behavioral issues and would get up at night to eat. Perez looked around the apartment. The refrigerator was stocked with food. He noticed the locks on the fridge and pantry doors, but according to his report, none of them were locked at the time of his visit. Emergency medics were called to check Benjamin's vitals, which came back normal. They asked Benjamin what happened to his eyes, and he said that he poked them. Perez was told to call CPS for further investigation, but just 1 month later, Benjamin was dead. Later, Officer Perez would testify that he regretted not doing more during and after the welfare check, that he should have questioned Benjamin alone. "I believe I could have done more. I wished I could have done more," he said. By February of 2022, arrest warrants were issued. Brandon Lee Cervera and Miranda Caceres were both charged with injury to a child with intent to cause serious bodily injury. Despite the gruesome nature of Benjamin's suffering, both were released on bond. Miranda's trial began in April of 2024. During jury selection and opening statement, the prosecution wasted no time in presenting gruesome evidence. The jury was shown the haunting video of Benjamin begging for bread just hours before his death. The room was silent except for a few gasps of horror. The testimony began with Detective Lawrence Saez, who methodically walked the jury through dozens of photographs and videos recovered from Miranda's phone and security cameras. The images were devastating. Over just 4 months, Benjamin had visibly deteriorated. His arms became skeletal, his face hollowed out, his skin stretching too tightly over his bones. Next on the stand was Dr. James Lukvar, a pediatrician and child abuse expert who had reviewed Benjamin's growth charts. Before his 4th birthday, Benjamin had been a healthy child with normal height and weight tracking. Then, something changed. Dr. Lukvar explained that abruptly after his 4th birthday, his weight began to decline. There was no medical reason for this, no underlying condition. The only explanation was starvation. The defense argued that Miranda had cooperated fully and had taken Benjamin to doctors, believing he had behavioral issues or possibly autism. But the prosecution presented overwhelming evidence of systematic abuse and starvation. Benjamin's 12-year-old brother testified, clutching a stuffed toy tightly in his hands. State District Judge Christina Escalona had allowed his guardian, a great aunt, to sit where he could see her. He refused to look toward Miranda, who stared at him with an expression that alternated between anger and boredom. He described the punishments Miranda inflicted on Benjamin. He spoke about the hand sanitizer, hot sauce, and cups of urine she forced Benjamin to drink. He explained how Miranda would throw Benjamin into the air in a twisted game she called flip-flop, letting him fall to the ground crying. How she would make him drink toilet water whenever she was mad or whenever Benjamin did something bad. The boy told the jury that Benjamin was always hungry. He tried to get food, but the pantry was locked. The fridge was locked. The cabinets were locked. The only thing left out was bread. Miranda would not feed Benji. She would feed him when my dad was there, or he would bring food, he testified. The defense called their own experts to challenge Dr. Molina's conclusions. Dr. William Anderson, a forensic pathologist, and Dr. Daniel Gibbard, a pediatric expert, both disputed the starvation diagnosis. I don't think he necessarily died of starvation, Gibbard said. It's more likely that something other than starvation caused his demise. The defense argued that Benjamin was simply a skinny child and that his weight wasn't uncommon for kids in the 5th percentile. Then, the defense shifted tactics, bringing in Miranda's family. Her mother, Alice, and sister, April, painted a picture of Miranda as a devoted but overwhelmed mother. Alice insisted. She loved those kids. She was the one running the house, not Brandon. She was treated like a slave. April described Miranda as the caring parent who played with the children, cooked and cleaned. The defense also called Dr. Joan Murphy, a clinical psychologist, who suggested that Benjamin may have been on the autism spectrum. However, under questioning, she admitted she had never actually reviewed his medical records. Her assessment was based only on photographs and interviews. Both sides made their final pleas to the jury. Cantrell argued that the prosecution had tunnel vision and ignored possible underlying medical issues. But prosecutor Thomas D'Amico reminded the jury of the locks on the fridge, pantry, and bedroom doors. He told them to remember Miranda's own words to police, the videos, the photographs, and the evidence. Then, prosecutor Michael Villarreal drove the first point home. You got to meet the monster that Benji lived with. After less than an hour of deliberation, the jury found Miranda Caceres guilty. She showed no emotion as the verdict was read. During sentencing, her defense attorney hoped for leniency, wanting the jury to sentence her to probation rather than prison. He said she loved being a mom and was a decent, quiet person. He revealed that she had a tattoo of Benjamin's birth date and death date on her arm. Miranda took the witness stand, emotional and wiping away tears. She denied abusing or starving Benjamin, telling the jury, I didn't starve him. I didn't force sanitizer. I never forced him to eat salsa. She claimed she was under Brandon's complete control and accused him of spanking, hitting, and dragging Benjamin through the house. A text message was read aloud that Miranda had sent to her mother. I don't know how long I can take this. This fucking kid. My son can't sleep because of this little 5-year-old that everyone thinks is so perfect. I'm done. This kid needs a good one. She denied sending that text repeatedly before claiming the words had come from Brandon, who had dictated what she typed. During closing arguments, prosecutor D'Amico played a video of Benjamin sitting in the dark crying, I want bread. Miranda could be heard saying he couldn't get bread and needed to lie down. He sarcastically said to the jury, starvation will continue until the morale improves. How I was raised, if a child is hungry, you feed them. Miranda Caceres could have been sentenced to life in prison. The jury, however, sentenced her to 25 years in prison. Brandon Severa's trial began with heartbreaking photographs of Benjamin's small, frail body hooked up to machines in the hospital. Prosecutor Michael Villarreal told the jury that Brandon had withheld food and water from his own son and failed to seek proper medical care. Day in and day out, Benji is begging for food, while Mr. Severa does absolutely nothing, he stated. Brandon's defense attorney, Jody Sawyer, argued that Benjamin did not starve to death and disputed the pathologist's findings. She said Benjamin was born premature, and his parents were told he would have health problems. She also noted that he had been seen by more than 10 medical professionals in the lead-up to his death. During the trial, Dr. Molina doubled down on her ruling that Benjamin had indeed starved to death. She showed his growth chart and pointed out that he had no growth within the last 10 months of his life. When looking at adults and assessing starvation, we can look at just weight loss. But when looking at children, it's not just about weight loss, but failure to grow, she testified. When he died, he had little to no body fat, and his intestinal tract had no food in it. Text messages between Brandon and Miranda were entered into evidence. In messages from August 12th, Brandon told Miranda that Benjamin had been begging for bread all day. Miranda replied telling Brandon to give him more bread. Brandon then responded, "He don't need to eat dinner." The tragic videos were once more played for the jury. In one captured just days before he died, Benjamin nervously asked his father for something to eat, his hands folded in front of him as his clothes hung off his frail body. He begged for bread, water, or milk, crying, "I want some bread." As the video played, many jury members had to look away. Brandon remained expressionless. In another video, Brandon closed Benjamin in his bedroom and told him to shut the fuck up. Despite the evidence, after nearly 7 hours of deliberation, the jury found Brandon Cervera not guilty on all charges. As the verdict was announced, Brandon sobbed. He was allowed to return home, a free man, while Benjamin remained in the ground. I don't normally comment when I read stories like these. Benjamin was let down. This system is broken, you guys, and it sucks. Rest in peace, Benjamin. The disappearances of the Skelton brothers. Disappearance. The Skelton brothers, Alexander, Tanner, and Andrew, were reported missing by their mother, Tanya Lynn Zolvers Skelton, and they didn't show up at her house as expected. The children had been with their father for a Thanksgiving visitation on November 25th of 2010, and were supposed to be returned to her custody the following day. Tanya tried to get a hold of her ex-husband, John Russell Skelton, but was unable to reach him. This prompted her to visit his residence, but he wasn't there. Instead, he was at the hospital, as he'd broken his ankle while trying to take his own life. The rope from the attempt was found hanging from a stairwell banister at his home, along with multiple toe straps. Investigation. The boy's father initially told investigators he'd left them with friends before changing his story to say they were in the care of a woman he'd met online several years before. Joanne Taylor was supposed to return them to Tanya, as John had planned to take his own life and didn't want his children to see. He said Taylor was married to a pastor named Mark, lived in either Jackson County or Hillsdale, Michigan, and drove a white or silver minivan. An Amber Alert was issued for Tanner, Andrew, and Alex, but police were unable to find any sign of the brothers, nor Taylor, leading them to believe she never existed and something else had happened to the trio. While hospitalized, John continued to change his story, claiming his sons had been given to an underground group that would keep them safe. He stated that, while they were still alive, they wouldn't be returned as long as their mother had sole custody. He also claimed to have had a vision of them being put in a dumpster in Ohio. While officers searched dumpsters in the indicated area, nothing was found. John was immediately arrested upon his release from the hospital and placed on suicide watch. He was subsequently charged for 3 counts of felony parental kidnapping, 3 counts of kidnapping, and 3 counts of false imprisonment. At a hearing in December of 2010, he changed his story once more, stating Andrew, Alex, and Tanner were in the care of an Amish organization called United Foster Outreach and Underground Sanctuaries, which isn't believed to exist. Investigators learned that, in mid-September 2010, John had withdrawn Andrew and Alex from school under the pretense of going on vacation and taken them to Florida without Tanya's knowledge. According to school officials, he'd also implied that he might need their records forwarded. Tanya subsequently went to Florida and had authorities force John, under the threat of arrest, to return her sons. It was shortly after that Tanya filed for the divorce, leading to a bitter custody battle. John had asked the court to sever her custody rights, given she was once a registered sex offender. She'd pled guilty to misdemeanor fourth-degree criminal sexual conduct against a 14-year-old boy in 1998, when she was 32. Following her son's disappearance, John said he feared his ex-wife had been abusing the children, but no evidence could be found to confirm this. In July of 2011, John took a plea deal, pleading no contest to 3 counts of false imprisonment. He was sentenced to 10 to 15 years in prison and is scheduled to remain incarcerated until November of 2025. He has tried on several occasions to receive parole, but has been repeatedly denied. While speaking to local media in 2018, John claimed he'd given the boys to 2 women and a man in a light-colored van who planned to take them to a farm along the Ohio-Indiana border. He also stated investigators needed to speak with Mosey Gingerich, a reality television star and author who could allegedly bring them back. Police tracked Gingerich down, but he'd never heard of the children. Gingerich agreed to visit John in prison. Upon them meeting, the latter became visibly shaken. Despite attempts to garner information, Gingerich was unsuccessful. Investigators had been investigating Alex, Tanner, and Andrew's disappearance as homicides, with John the prime suspect. Cell phone records show he was in Morenci, Michigan on the morning of November 26, 2010, with state police adding that it also pinged in Holiday City, Ohio, approximately 25 miles from his residence. John's blue Dodge Caravan, Michigan's license plate 9JQH93, was spotted on the Ohio Turnpike along the Michigan-Ohio border between 4:29 a.m. and 6:46 a.m. on the morning of November 26. On top of this, his online search records showed he'd looked up how to break a neck prior to his sons going missing. In September of 2017, the remains of 3 children were found in a shed in Missoula, Montana. But forensics showed they didn't belong to the Skelton brothers. 3 years later, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, or the NCMEC, released age progression images of them, showing Andrew at 19, Alex at 17, and Tanner at 15. 13 years after they went missing, Tana asked the Lenawee County Probate Court to declare her sons legally deceased. A pretrial hearing was held in June of 2024, with the next postponed until that December. There hasn't been an update as to whether the hearing was held, and if so, what the outcome was. There's a Facebook page dedicated to the case, Missing Skelton Brothers, Morenci, Michigan. Over the years, the case had been investigated by Michigan State Police, the Morenci Police Department, and the FBI, with the former agency becoming the lead investigating force in 2013. John's mother, Roxanne Skelton, doesn't believe her son had anything to do with Alex, Tanner, and Andrew's disappearances. Details. The Skelton brothers went missing from Morenci, Lenawee County, Michigan on November 6, 2010. Alexander William Alex Skelton was 7 years old, and he was last seen wearing black pajama pants and a gray shirt. He also wore glasses, but it's unknown if he had them with him at the time of his disappearance. He stood at 3'9", weighed 45 pounds, had short brown hair and brown eyes, and 2 scars, one on his chin and another on his hairline. Tanner Lucas Skelton was 5 years old, and he was last seen wearing camouflage pajama pants and a Scooby-Doo shirt. He was 3'6" tall, weighed 40 pounds, and had short strawberry blonde hair and blue eyes. Andrew Ryan Skelton was 9 years old, and he was last wearing brown pajamas with orange trim. He stood 4'1", weighed 57 pounds, and had short brown hair and brown eyes. Case contact information. Currently, all 3 brothers are classified as endangered missing with foul play suspected. Anyone with information regarding the case is asked to contact the Morenci Police Department at 517-458-7104. Tips can also be called into the Lansing Post of the Michigan State Police at either 517-322-1907 or 517-636-0689. The torture board, Melissa Stoddard. It was around 10 p.m. on December 12, 2012, when paramedics in Sarasota, Florida, were called to a home where it was reported that a young girl had stopped breathing. When they arrived, it quickly became apparent that the case was much more complex than the caller had portrayed. Not only was the young girl not breathing, she had evident ligature marks all across her body. The home belonged to Kenneth Stoddard, who lived with his wife, Misty Stoddard, and their children ranging in age between 4 and 15. It was a blended family. The young girl who had stopped breathing was Kenneth's 11-year-old daughter from a prior relationship, Melissa Stoddard. According to Misty, that evening, Melissa had been upset and had refused to go to bed. She said that she gave Melissa some nighttime medicine and then sent her back to bed, where she quieted down. However, Misty claimed that when she checked on Melissa sometime later, she found her unconscious and not breathing, so she called 911. Paramedics entered the secluded home and were taken aback by how dirty it was. They found Melissa laying on her back in the living room. She wasn't breathing. The room was dark and the stench of vomit was overpowering. Kenneth was still on the phone to 911, performing chest compressions with one hand. As the paramedics got closer, they could see marks on Melissa's arms, some fresh, some older. What struck them as odd was that Melissa wasn't wearing pajamas. It was late at night, and she was wearing jean shorts and a long-sleeve shirt. There was duct tape on her wrists and ankles. The 2 paramedics, Scott McComas and Billy Green, found the Stoddards' behavior peculiar. They both kept getting in the way as they desperately tried to revive Melissa. They were reluctant to provide medical information, and the paramedics couldn't help but feel as though the concern they were expressing for Melissa's welfare was not genuine. As Scott later said, "It's just the vibe I felt. It's just a weird feeling." After unsuccessful CPR attempts, paramedics rushed Melissa to Doctors Hospital in Sarasota. At the hospital, Melissa's heart began to beat again, but her heart had stopped beating for almost an hour. Her brain was swollen from the lack of oxygen, and she was suffering from severe brain damage. She was transported to an all-children's hospital in St. Petersburg, where she was classified as brain dead. The doctors noticed that Melissa had ligature marks to her upper arms, wrists, ankles, and thighs. She was severely underweight, 5'5" and weighing only 88 pounds. There were stitches above her left eye, fresh lacerations to her wrists, a broken left hand, and marks to her neck and buttocks. Bruises to her thighs looked as though she had been beaten with a belt, and her feet were swollen and bruised. Skin was peeling off her wrists. Hospital social worker Ken Rigsby said, "It was possibly the most horrific case I have ever worked on." Upon informing police of the disturbing revelation, they interviewed Kenneth and Misty. The couple claimed that sometimes Melissa needed to be restrained because of behavioral issues. They said she was autistic and would be restrained to protect both herself and her other siblings. Kenneth admitted they would bind Melissa's wrists to her ankles in a hogtied fashion, using shoelace-style strings, Velcro straps, tape, and other bindings. When police spoke with the other children in the home, they revealed a very disturbing portrait. They said that Melissa was routinely tied up as punishment, and that Kenneth and Misty would put duct tape over her mouth to stop her from screaming and crying. The couple would tie Melissa to a wooden board where she would remain for long periods. Melissa's 15-year-old brother told police that he had helped Misty remove the wooden board from Melissa's bedroom before the ambulance arrived. Police recovered 2 wooden boards from the woods near the home, along with a helmet fashioned with restraints and several rows of duct tape. The wooden boards had blood, hair, and fecal matter stuck to them. The children detailed more horrific abuse. Sometimes Melissa would be tied to her bed. She wasn't allowed to eat inside with the rest of the family. Instead, she was fed in a fenced spot outside, which the children called the coral. On occasion, Melissa would be tied up and put in a swimming pool. Despite having a bedroom, she would be forced to sleep outside on a filthy mattress. Life for Melissa wasn't always this tragic. Before moving to Florida, she had lived with her mother, Leisha Stoddard, in Greensboro, North Carolina. Leisha and Kenneth had met while both serving in the Marine Corps. They were married in 1998, and Melissa was born in 2001. Like her older brother, Melissa was diagnosed with autism. When Melissa was 5 years old, Leisha and Kenneth divorced. In North Carolina, Melissa attended McClever Education Center, where her teachers recalled how she loved to reenact The Cat in the Hat and The Lion King. She was a loving child, always curious about those around her. While she had challenges, including a hot temper and tantrums due to her autism, staff said she was showing steady progress in the highly structured setting. In 2012, Melissa's life changed forever. During a visit to Kenneth and Misty in Florida with their older brother, Misty discovered that the 13-year-old boy had sexually abused Melissa. The boy was arrested and charged, given an ultimatum that Melissa and her brother could not remain under the same roof. It was decided that Melissa would move to Florida to live with Kenneth, Misty, and her 5 children. Leisha agreed to this arrangement, having no cause for concern. Kenneth had always been a good father during their marriage and had never restrained or abused children in the past. From the moment Melissa arrived in Florida, in September of 2012, she was treated differently than her step-siblings. She was forced to eat outside and given different food than the rest of the family. Kenneth and Misty put Melissa on a strict gluten-free diet, which they believed would help her autism. Initially, Melissa attended Oak Park School, where she showed progress, much like she had in North Carolina. Her communication skills were developing, and she was able to express her needs. One teacher even commented to Kenneth, "Your daughter could have gone to Harvard," because of how well Melissa had been behaving. However, as her language skills improved, she began offering insight into home life, shouting phrases like, "Get out of my house," followed by, "Now look what you've done. All right, that's it," mimicking what she heard at home. She had problems with the restricted food, becoming upset when other children were allowed treats and begging for food. Starting in November, Melissa began missing school. Kenneth and Misty claimed the school wasn't adhering to her strict diet. The last day Melissa attended school was November 15th. Staff became concerned about her well-being, with a guidance counselor going to the family's home, but Misty refused to open the door. One teacher, Paul, became so concerned he attempted to report to DCF anonymously, but failed to complete the submission. Meanwhile, someone at the home was using the internet to search disturbing terms like how to restrain a child at night, medication for psychopaths, best gag to keep somebody quiet, and human muzzle. On December 1st, Kenneth purchased a 4x8 sheet of plywood, returning the following week to purchase 4 black Velcro strips. He bought 3 rolls of duct tape, captured on surveillance footage. Melissa had completely fallen through the cracks, cut off from everyone except those in the home. A couple of weeks before she died, she attempted to seek help at Walmart, approaching several strangers asking for help. None thought to call for assistance. A neighbor, Devin Dermonti, had heard sounds of slapping, cursing from a woman and a girl crying coming from the Stoddard home for around 3 months. The noises were so terrible he considered calling 911, but decided not to, fearing police wouldn't do anything and the child might be harmed more. Police obtained a search warrant for Kenneth and Misty's computer, Nikon camera, and cell phone, discovering that they documented the abuse. One video showed Melissa kneeling on a concrete slab in the yard at night, looking into the laundry room where Misty stood with a video camera. A step-sibling can be heard in questioning. Why can't she just go away? Why is she crying? Melissa begged to come inside before wailing, throwing her arms in the air and kicking her legs. Eventually, her spirit completely broken. She fell silent and buried her head in her hands. Other videos showed Melissa sitting on a concrete slab with her arms bound behind her, staring ahead with dry blood on her nose and a makeshift bandage on her head. Police also uncovered photographs documenting Melissa's decline. A Halloween 2002 photo shows Melissa smiling in her witch costume. But by a month later, photographs show her with a swollen lip and cuts across her face. Unfortunately, after 5 days at the hospital, it was decided that Melissa's life support should be turned off. She was pronounced dead at 5:39 a.m. on December 17th. Her autopsy determined she had died from hypoxia, deprivation of adequate oxygen supply. 2 days after Melissa died, Kenneth was arrested and charged with aggravated child abuse. Misty, who was pregnant, attempted to take her own life before being arrested on the same charges. The Department of Children and Families took custody of the other 5 children. Misty stood trial first in June of 2014, with charges elevated to first-degree murder. The prosecution detailed how Melissa had been tortured and abused, arguing that Misty had covered Melissa's mouth with duct tape and left her alone to suffocate. Misty's own children testified against her. Her 16-year-old son, Jarrett Eastman, explained how Melissa's autism left her mother frustrated and detailed how both Kenneth and Misty would strap Melissa to the wooden board and gag her. Misty testified on her own behalf, claiming she loved Melissa and that Kenneth was responsible for the restraints. She made the startling claim that the plywood boards had actually been purchased for sexual bondage purposes between her and Kenneth. The jury deliberated for just 2 hours before finding Misty guilty of first-degree murder and aggravated child abuse. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, plus an additional 30 years. Kenneth was consequently convicted of aggravated manslaughter, aggravated child abuse, and tampering with evidence. During his sentencing, the judge addressed him. The single most important duty of a parent is to protect their child. You failed miserably. Kenneth was sentenced to 65 years in prison. And that, dear listeners, brings a close to these true crime and unsolved mysteries. Before I go any further, I would like to acknowledge the other members of BackToAshes. Thank you all so much for your continued and dedicated support. It does not go unnoticed, as I always like to say. Without you, I wouldn't have a voice, and there would not be a BackToAshes, and I'd be sitting here talking to myself like a crazy man. Thank you. If you're sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you comfortably. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed these cases. Until next time, please take care of yourselves. I'll be reading to you soon. Have yourselves a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good evening. Peace, love, and light to you all.